Listen to the whispers and look in the shadows. Learn how to look in the whispers, look in the shadows and listen to the whispers, because in the world we have today, and it was getting there back when I was a kid, there was a lot of noise, a lot of yelling going on. And unless what you saw in the bright lights, that's what you paid attention to. And he made the point, don't spend so much time listening to the loud noises. Listen for the whispers. Because it's the whispers maybe that have the person who's quietly sitting back and sharing something, the animal, the bird, the whatever you hear in the wilderness. That's what ought to pay attention to. He told me something else that's so important to me today. He said, I want you to know the difference, he didn't say it quite this way, the difference between gaining information and knowing something. And one of the things he would do when some person would come by and brag about their high school education or whatever, and he would say to that person, look, just because you have a lot of education doesn't mean you know anything. Yeah. Well, what in the world was he driving at? What he was driving at, it's a good thing to gather information, don't get me wrong. But knowing something gets to the spiritual side of who we are. Knowing something gets to the depth of our being. Knowing something is a reflection of being human. And it's much deeper than just gathering information. I've never forgotten that. I spent a lot of time in the classroom, both as a student and as a teacher. And I worked very hard as a teacher, trying to help my students not only gain information, but know something. And to start with, I wanted my students to begin to know who they are. What? My name is, that's your label. Who are you? What do you believe? What do you value? Etc. Those are the things that help me appreciate nature at a level beyond a guidebook. And I am troubled by those who stop at that and can brag about how many different species of birds they can identify. There's more to it than that. Millard Nelson would say there was more to it than that. So that's a little bit of my background that got me interested in the environment and got me into the difference between knowing and just gathering information about it. I've written a number of books about it.
Yeah,
The Land is one.
Yeah.
What's
Never Curse the Rain.
Yeah, Never Curse the Rain.
Sometimes we
And
do.
so-
Like if you've experienced flooding, you might curse the rain.
Never Curse the Rain has got more attention than you ever could imagine.
Yeah, yeah.
Whenever this big old rainstorm comes up, I get an email from half a dozen people. Are you sure about Never Curse the Never Curse the Rain is a book about water and the importance of water.
Yes.
And the importance of pure water and how people don't know this. We only have so much water on this planet. There's no new water coming from Mars or some other place. We've got what we've got, and we better figure out how to deal with it. It's an issue of today, it's an issue of tomorrow, it's an issue of next week. It's one of the biggest issues facing the world.
Tonight, as a matter of fact, there is a talk at UW, so I'm glad you're here and not there for that, but it's a very important topic on PFAS, the forever chemicals. Christy Ramachal, who's the Aquatic Sciences Director, is speaking tonight on that, and it's so critical.
What have we got next?
Okay, you have more books, Jerry. A Farm Story in One-Room Schools.
Well,
Anyone go to one-room school?
How many of you attended a one-room country school?
Couple.
Oh, not many. We're dying off. One-room country school, for those of you that may not know, had all 8 grades in one room with one teacher. And when I started school in 1939, Our country school had no electricity, no indoor plumbing, old wood stove in the back, and it was one of the most wonderful educations you could ever imagine. Because what we learned, we learned the obvious things, reading, writing, and arithmetic, but we learned how to get along with each other. There were German kids, Norwegian kids, Polish kids, Bohemian kids. I mean, we had them all in our neighborhood, and we learned how to get along, and the teacher never said, you're going to have to get along with these kids. Nobody ever said that. We knew we had to do that. The second thing we learned, which was so important, we learned how to help each other. And some of the kids, we didn't have anything, but some of the kids had less than that. And they came to school with a lunch of slice of bread with some large bread on it. Yeah. That was their lunch. And we would all chip in, give them a cookie and something else. Learned how to get along and help each other. All of that is fundamental to a relationship to the environment. Learning how to get along, even though a person may be so different. And this young lady, she was a grade behind me, Polish gal, started school not able to speak a word of English. And people say, when I talk, I've given lots of talks about women in school, I often hear, well, you realize, Jerry, that the kids coming from the country schools most of them never amounted to anything. You realize that, don't you? And I mentioned this gal who got a PhD in chemistry. He was a research chemist for Upjohn. There's a lot of examples like that. The country school had a lake just a quarter of a mile away. And an Arbor Day. You remember Arbor Day? That just came along a few weeks ago. We would walk around the Channel Lake, and she would have us, our teacher would have us, then sit down, all of us, we were about 15 of us or so in all 8 grades, and talk about what you saw, what you heard, what you felt. Man, is that a way to learn? I didn't realize some of us were not too happy about doing that, but I thought it was great. I always liked doing that. So let's go on.
There's Susie. There she is.
Susie and I have written several things, and we do TV together. And I must say, she's a heck of a lot better looking than I am.
She's a good cook too. And most recently, the fair.
Yeah. How many of you saw the recent show I did on the fairs?
How many of you were in 4-H? 4-Hers? Yes.
That's the most recent one. And we are, Susie and I are working on a new one called, what's it called, Susie? Old Farm Country Christmas. Oh. That's going back to what it was like during the early days, what Christmas was like, all that sort of thing. That we're doing that with PBS right now.
So Jerry he uses themes, even in his novels, and they're primarily different environmental themes. So you're going to start talking about agriculture, industrial farming, small acre farming.
Now, the themes books I've written about, and the TV shows I've done, I do a lot of radio too. I'm talking about, in the agricultural area, having grown up on a family farm, having grown up on a farm where neighbors were as far away as a quarter mile, and people would say, well, you were really alone out there, weren't you? We weren't. We were a community. Everybody, just like we learned how to do that in the country school. We helped each other with work. We played together, worked together. As an aside, we had a little band, 3 farmers. One of them played the violin, another one played the banjo, and this guy from Czechoslovakia played the concertina. They couldn't read a note of music, none of them. But whenever there was a birthday, whenever there was an anniversary, any kind of an event, we would pull all the seats back at the country school, and these 3 guys would play. And we would dance. The polka, the schottisch, or circle two-step. How many of you remember doing those dances? Some of you. Oh, it was great fun. And in the midst of the Depression and during World War II, when times were tough, we needed something like that little band to give us a sense of hope. Hope was disappearing during those days, and this little band would bring us together. What does that have to do with the environment? There's hope for the environment as well. And we've got to realize that hope, I've written a whole book about the power of hope. It's coming out in a year or so. It isn't available yet. But hope is such a powerful, powerful notion. And whatever it is we want to do, and wherever we are right now, hope is what keeps us going. What's next?
Well, I need to point out who's doing all the work here. That would be me. I am apparently the garden manager, Steve's the farm manager, I don't know. This tool, I think, Jerry, your dad, right? We call it the marker, and we put a huge rock on it, and then I drag it and create the rows. And it's super heavy, but very effective. And as long as I've known you, we've had the marker. So we will soon be marking.
There's no better way to teach children about the environment than to introduce them to gardening. They learn without, and I'm a big proponent of learning without realizing you're learning. Yeah. Setting up a situation so somebody can learn without you saying, here's what you're going to learn, or bang, bang, bang. That's not how I do it. And so the garden is such an interesting way of teaching such things as, where does your food come from? I will never forget this example. One of my grandkids, he was probably 4 or 5 years old, and was coming, I don't know where they were, where they stopped at the farm. And I was digging carrots at the time. And he came out to the garden, and he said, what are you doing, Grandpa? Well, I'm digging carrots. Do carrots come from the ground?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. I showed him a carrot, and I showed him another. He says, they're all of different sizes. You go to the store, of course, they're not. He did not know that carrots came from the ground. He did not know they were of different sizes. He learned so much that day without realizing he was learning it.
And Susie has a great book for children and getting them excited about gardening.
Here's where Steve really did a fantastic job. You're supposed to hold your hand up now so they know who Steve is. He took the pictures for this Barnes book. And if there was ever a book that I wrote that touched more people, the Barnes was probably it.
They want to save it. It's a symbol, right? It means something.
It's a symbol of rural America. It's a symbol of where we have been. It's a symbol of where we have forgotten sometimes what was important in life. The old barn stands there to remind us of that. And my ego, when I used to travel all over the place. I was in Boston one time, and I go to the libraries to see if I have any of my books. I always do that.
And bookstores.
And lo and behold, here's the Barnes book. The Wisconsin Agricultural History, I wrote this a couple of years ago, and if for those who are concerned about the relationship of agriculture to the environment, this book would help. I go back, I spent 4 years writing it, I go back and look at the glaciers and how they contributed to the land that we have now. I, in some considerable depth, talk about Native American agriculture and how they saw a relationship to Mother Earth. They revered the land in a way that many farmers did not. All of that is in this book, bringing you up to date and where we are right now. And associated with it is the book about cheese, history of cheese making.
And beer.
I got a brewery book in here somewhere too. And then these,
Farming values.
yeah, these are some of the. There's four little books. Every farm tells a story. Living a Country Year. These are books where I try to capture with stories the values and the beliefs of rural America at an earlier day. And
Hey, who's that cutie? Who's the cutie up there? Who's that?
And I'm
You can tell by the ears.
easy.
Oh, the pig. Who's that up in the corner, Jerry? Who's that up in the corner?
Yeah,
your
that's my dad up there in
Yeah.
the corner.
Yeah. So Jerry finds humor
In fact,
too in all of
just
this.
a couple of notes from Rural Wit and Wisdom, and I've written a couple of related books. My dad was a storyteller. Everybody in our neighborhood were storytellers. I guess we had a few people had radios. Nobody had ever heard television when I was a kid.
Or Signal.
Oh, the computer, what the nope, that was. Anyway, we told stories. Whenever farmers got together, they told stories, and I was a part of that.
Are you
But
gonna
one
share
of my
something
dad's
from that
favorite.
one? Are you going to share?
Yeah, I'm going to read a
Yeah,
couple of
okay.
things from there in a minute. But he said he had a lot of one-liners, and I've captured many one-liners. I just think they're kind of important. I was interviewing an old guy once, and I put this in one of my books. And as I will often do, I said, John, how are you doing? And he said, you know, Jerry, I was born with nothing, and I have most of it left. That's the kind of thing that I'm trying to capture in these books. I want to read a little bit from this Rural Wisdom book. I want to hold that for a second.
Steve, I think you took the
Why don't
pig
you
photo.
why don't you just hold
Yeah.
that for me?
Okay.
One of the things that interested me, a lot of things interest me, but I was interested in what kind of clothing did people wear back in the 30s and 40s? So here we go. And this was written as what you should do. Wear simple clothing. A cotton shirt and a couple pair of bib overalls, about all a man needs, except for going to church. New overalls for trips to town on Saturday night, faded overalls for work. A woman needs several good aprons, the kind that come up to the neck and extend below the dress and have a couple of pockets to carry safety pins and a handkerchief. A good apron protects the dress from spills and splashes. It's also a good place to dry your hands, gather eggs, wipe away a child's tears, or wave when you want Joe's attention in the back 40. Never buy a shirt that doesn't have a pocket. It's where you keep your notebook and a pencil. Always wear long-sleeved shirts. They protect from mosquitoes and other pests, prevent excessive sunburn, and can be rolled up when the weather is warm. Short-sleeve shirts have no such multiple uses. Avoid wearing a necktie. It cuts off circulation to the brain and prevents clear thinking.
Ah, that's what's happening.
I was one time speaking to a cooperative co-op meeting, and the directors all sit in a row up in front, all wearing neckties, and I read this thing. Okay,
Make sure no
couple
one here is
more.
wearing one, right?
Never wear short pants. They were made for people who never walked through wild berry patches and wet knee-high grass. And then this one captures it all. Don't go outside without wearing your shirt. If God had meant for you to run around naked, you would have been born that way. That's the kind of stuff that I just think is important when times are tough. You need somebody to capture this kind of stuff. And here's this may fit a few of you. It's all about growing older. Age really doesn't matter unless you're cheddar cheese. For cheddar cheese, the older the better. As we grow older, we tend to forget things that happened and remember things that didn't. Be careful of the past. It always looks better than it was. A couple more. Cherish the memories of yesterday. Dream big dreams about tomorrow. Live happily today. Curiosity may have killed the cat, but it is one of the things that keeps older people young. Okay.
Very nice. Okay, we're going to move through a couple of these. Land use.
Now, one of the things that still concerns me is when I see valuable farmland, and then there's a big sign for rent, and you see a condo going up or an apartment house. That troubles me. And we see a lot of that. Around Madison, it's all over the place. Madison happens to be, whether you know it or not, we have some of the best soil in Wisconsin, here in Dane County. And if you want to build a condo, build it in the sands of Marquette County or someplace like that. So that's one of the things that troubles me. And
this is a lot of phenology, so tracking the
well,
seasons
I
and
also
changes.
write rather extensively about the seasons and the importance of keeping track of that. And Rochera Journal is actually, I have each page has one of these one-liners, and it has room for you to write. Steve took pictures all through it. I just talked about gardening. I guess we can go past that one. And we've had just another comment about our forest project. I mentioned this to somebody before. When we bought the place in 1966, we began planting red pine trees, and we planted 1,000 trees a year for 4 or 5 years. And then we continued to plant 300-400 every year. And today, now, these many years later, we've got pine 75 feet tall, and that's the logging that we're going to be doing this summer. And to me, one of the most, and I've written columns about trees I have known. That sounds stupid, but I have gotten through my dad acquainted with a lot of different trees. And we have at our farm, unbelievable, because we are on what's known as the
Terminal.
biological tension zone, which means northern and Wisconsin plant species grow together. Plants, animals, birds, wildflowers. We're doubly blessed. We have native bur oak on our farm. It's a southern Wisconsin native tree. We have white pine, native on our farm, northern Wisconsin tree. So forestry is a very important part of what we're doing. And we have contract with the DNR. We do sustainable forestry. And we've done, Steve, what is this, about the 4th logging, something like that, since we've had the place. So
you got CCC.
Oh, and if you want to read my stuff about the environment in forestry, I wrote the history of the Civilian Conservation Corps. How many of you are familiar with the CCC? Any of you in it? Or relative in it? I did have a guy I raised my hand, he was 97 years old. He said, I'm in the CCC. The CCC operated from 1933 to 1941 in the midst of the Great Depression. And it provided young men an opportunity to have a job, to contribute to the environment, and to have hope for the future. It was a hopeless time. Some of you are old enough to remember some of the Depression. It was a hopeless time. Those on the farms were lucky in a sense because we had something to eat. But the young men, and older ones too, as far as that goes, and their families, didn't have anything to eat. didn't have a roof over their heads. And so we have these young men traveling across the country. And the CCC, Franklin Delano Roosevelt's idea, provided an opportunity for them to learn about the environment, to learn about nature, and to provide some money for the family. A wonderful, wonderful program. Even the staunch conservatives came around to applauding FDR for coming up with the CCC.
Timber.
Susie is up there, and she's the lead author for a book on the history of timber and the logging industry. I've written a book about it too, and the White Pine Was King. If you want the pair, the adult version is The White Pine Was King. Timber is the version that's for young readers. Timber has a lot more pictures, easier to read.
All right, this is Steve up at one of the ponds taking photos. And Jerry's already talked a bit about the quiet season.
Yeah, we can probably go
series
past.
of-
These books are available back there on the table, and you're welcome to, you can buy them by the dozens or even one at a time, however you want to do it.
The old timer says, I think we know who that is.
The Old Timer says, I wrote can you believe this? I wrote a weekly column for 60 years for various newspapers, and I ended my columns with The Old Timer Says. With such eloquent phrases as, when you're doing nothing, how do you know when you're finished?
Memoirs. But this is my very favorite Jerry Epps book, Limping Through Life. Jerry has polio, and I think it's wonderfully done. And Once a Professor, those are your children. I think they're
Well,
wonderful.
just let me stop for a minute.
Okay.
I haven't mentioned that in 1947 I had polio, and that changed everything for me because I was my right leg was paralyzed for a better part of 3-4 months, and I was in 8th grade, getting ready to go to high school. I could play no sports. I couldn't walk, and that picture of that calf and me. That's the summer that I was recovering from polio, and you may find this strange, but that little calf was a bull calf. Stormy was his name. I was trying to teach him how to lead so I could take him to the county fair. I was in 4-H. And Stormy was teaching me how to walk. And we had quite a go of it that summer. He was a bull-headed bull, and I was a bull-headed German.
But it's why you became a writer, right? Otherwise, you'd have been playing baseball.
And that's how I became a writer,
Yeah.
because I couldn't do anything else.
More gardening, themes, impacts on people, rural communities.
Now, on farms and rural communities, it's not here, but it's a different publisher, Fulcrum Publishing. I talk about, you can get it from Fulcrum Publishing. I talk about farms of the future, communities of the future. This is just a list of my novels. I won't go through them with you.
But there's environmental themes.
But
running through them.
I've done 8 of them.
Coming soon.
Seeds of Suspicion is the newest novel, should be coming out this fall. And
We sometimes have fun outside too. We don't just work.
outdoor recreation. Steve and I canoed in the boundary waters of northern Minnesota 25 summers in a row. And if you want a place, how many of you know about the boundary waters in northern Minnesota? Quite a few of you. Thousands of acres right against the Canadian border. And we always selected a campsite where nobody else was around.
Except the girls sunning.
Not that we hated people, but we wanted to enjoy nature at its fullest, the loons and everything else that goes on in the boundary waters. And Steve's a big old husky guy, so he did all the
Portaging. Yeah, he portaged.
all the portaging.
Yeah.
But we had a great time doing that every summer.
This is fun. Yeah, Jerry has a new book coming out. Right here's the mug. It's super cute.
This is the mug about the book.
Yeah, sometimes the best thing to do is go fishing.
So the idea is that you can drink coffee and learn about lunkers at the same time.
So that event will be Saturday, May 3rd, 2 p.m. at the Verona Public Library. Now we're coming up here, so Earth Day, Jerry and I wrote Planning an Idea 2 years ago.
You just go right ahead. I'm going to be quiet now.
That's kind of hard to believe, Jerry. Let's fact check you on that. Okay, why did we write the book? So Jerry and I, after working on the farm or a family meal, whatever we were doing, inevitably he and I would start talking about environmental issues, usually getting kind of upset about it, and then we decided we should do something about it. So we started thinking about how, and Jerry's been working very hard right now to save the humanities. He's speaking out about the importance of the arts and humanities, the loss of National Endowment for the Humanities funding. And so we were thinking about, and my mom was an artist, and I didn't inherit that at all, but that we need critical and creative thinking, and that sometimes we have to think outside the box. And so we wanted to look at some of these and global issues, because climate change doesn't know boundaries. Sometimes the people most impacted are those least contributing to the problem. And we can list all the different environmental problems, but the polarization is so extraordinary that we can't move the needle on any of this. And I wonder today if people would care about what Gaylord Nelson said, or go to the Stock Pavilion, or read A Silent Spring. Sometimes I wonder if it would happen today. But I'm glad it happened and that we have that legacy. And then this idea of sometimes it's just, so many people today, I don't want to read the news. I don't want to know what's going on in the news. People want to put their heads down, and I understand that because it's terrifying. But to allow others to think for us is very dangerous, right? And that to think of our own experiences, that's knowing something. Jerry talked about, how do you know what you know? So we wrote a guidebook, how to apply critical and creative thinking to all aspects of our lives. It doesn't just have to be about environmental issues, that we need collaboration, to look within and challenge our own views. Jerry always reminds us it's okay to grieve your old ideas. What I believe now is very different from when I was a teenager, when I went to college. My parents were horrified when I came home with these new ideas. It was like, oh my gosh, we sent her to college and she came back with these crazy ideas. So, and we are also, and Jerry's still learning, lifelong learning is very important to us. These are all photos also from the farm. So critical, creative thinking can provide a foundation for all kinds of discussions. Who are these people, Jerry?
Well, those are my folks, my dad and mom, and that's a classic picture of what farm folk looked like back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. They left the farm in 1973. And moved to Wild Rose, because in those days, if you were a successful farmer, you were able to move to the nearby village to retire. And my dad hated every minute of living in Wild Rose. I asked him one time, I said, what don't you like about it? He said, it's the traffic. He said, I sit here and there's traffic. I tell you, it's unbelievable. I said, how many cars went by? 4. My mother, a farm wife, people don't realize how much work they had to do. She was in charge of the chickens. She was in charge of the garden. She was in charge of the health of the family. She was in charge of the birthday parties and all of that sort of thing. And she didn't even have a driver's license, but she was in charge of all of that sort of thing. And her chickens, we had 100, 150 leghorn layers, and the eggs, in this language today, people don't even understand it. She would take the eggs to the mercantile Wild Rose and trade them for groceries. And when somebody said, well, Eleanor, what are you going to do Saturday afternoon? I'm going to Wild Rose Trading. And I said, what? Anyway, I've got to do more with talking about the power and importance of the farm women. They were essential to the success of the farm. She did all the book work. I've got all the records. She wrote down every 5 cents earned and every 10 cents spent, and that's about the way it worked too.
Yeah.
Okay,
Jerry and I also spent a lot of time talking about what's true and facts and how do you know what you know. And so when I approach difficult conversations, what works for me, so I'll share it, somewhat works sometimes, is to ask people, well, how do you know that? I don't immediately say you're wrong, but how do you know that? And I do that with students all the time. Like, they write research papers, they need to cite their sources. And then we talk about what makes a good source. And I used to be able to say a .gov or a .edu website. That's all, good. They're just sharing information. I can't even say that anymore. So, but to be critically thinking about your sources. When something happens to you, you know, right? You've witnessed it. And so Jerry and I have, in our book, we talk a lot about different sources and example, AI, it's here. I think I've had good and bad relationships with it. I think we need people fact checking it. I really do. This is an AI generated photo. There's actually a photo that comes up every time there's like a serious flood in a city, and it's a shark with a car going down Main Street. Mm-hmm. And it was a photo of someone surfing alongside a shark. Yeah. And then it got edited, and now every time there's a flood, it pops up as if that's what happened there. And the other one that just during Act 10 with all the protests up at the square, there was a reporter who said, and here I am in Madison, Wisconsin, and there were palm trees in the background. And I'm like, okay, we're not that stupid. So no, you are not actually on site. You are not live. Those things are just really important, and paying attention to the background, or Steve with metadata, know where it's coming from. So we have a lot of barriers to why we can't seem to make progress, have these conversations. We're told to grow up and be practical. You gotta get a job, you gotta pay the bills. We have a fear of being wrong. We have our discipline blinders, so thinking more interdisciplinary, that scientists and artists can work together and they can do amazing things. Jerry and I agree we have to take a deep breath and agree that what we're doing isn't working. Grieve old opinions. One size may not fit all. And I love this one. Silos have a place in farming, but not in thinking. So don't be so narrow that you aren't open to some new solutions. So we're hoping with this we can take a step in the right direction. Jerry talks a lot about hope. Don't give up hope. Create forums for respectful conversations. Gather like we are tonight, right? We're celebrating Earth Day, but we're talking about some very serious issues. We cannot deny that, money talks, affordable solutions, the economy, we want jobs, all of that is important. And then looking at, we also believe it's important that we're not telling the Native stories, but we share lessons from them and the impact of our decisions impacting 7 generations. Play, allow yourselves to get dirty. I was so embarrassed. My boss, she has perfectly manicured nails and I do not. And I was in a meeting with her the other day and I looked down and I had dirt under my nails because I had been getting the garden ready. And I was like, oh, okay, I know she's gonna know. So I'm a little more attentive to that. And then scroll less and live more. Way too much time on social media or phones. I was teaching a class this morning and my students are just like, the whole time. It's really concerning. So if you could help us keep Earth Day alive, maybe we need a new environmental movement, maybe we need to infuse the environmental movement, but have a happy Earth Day. This is Jerry planting. I actually got to see Jane Goodall speak once at UW-Madison. Huge fan, what a thrill, but what you do makes a difference. You just have to decide what kind of difference you want to make, and I love that lesson. So these are Jerry's on social media, YouTube, it's his own website. So I think we'll wrap it up here and take a few questions or comments if you want to share your own stories of the Stock Pavilion. Or any final comments?
One of the, I am always optimistic. And if we can once again, and it was true when I was a kid, learn how to work together, we can solve the problems that we face with the environment and a lot of other things. We are a divided nation these days. I'm at one level trying to bring rural and urban people together, and the county fair TV show, I'm very right out front saying that the fair is one way that we can bring people together. But I have hope that we can do that. And we just cannot continue. I'm better than you are and all this kind of stuff. The other thing that troubles me, and this may bother you when I say this, but there is more to life than money. Yes. Greed is not going to get us there. Greed is not going to get us there. With that, questions, comments?
So one other issue, an issue that I think a lot about is access and providing access. So we talk about the farm, and we're so lucky to have that space, right? Steve and I have 12 beds in our backyard. We still garden in town as well. That I'm concerned about our parks, our national parks, and people having access to that, to museums, to our gardens. Community gardens can play a huge role. We know that having green space helps cut down on crime. Steve and I live by Troy Gardens. They do this amazing garden bed. It's in the shape of a pizza and the slices, and the kids come and they plant things they want to have on a pizza someday. And then they harvest it and they make their pizza and they cook it in this stone oven, and it's so fun. And they come from all over our neighborhoods, and so I think it's important to remember that too. We've done container planting. If you have an apartment, if you have a little bit of space or a deck or something, that I've grown my best tomatoes out of pots, frankly.
Anyone have a comment, question? Yes, ma'am.
We have lived in our house for 51 years.
What, I didn't hear.
Lived in their house for 51 years.
Back in the 70s and 80s, the snow used to be up to the fence.
Yeah, the snow used to be up to the fence in the 70s and 80s.
Now there's no snow.
And now no snow.
No, I know, that's what climate change is about.
I was reading
Well, we lived
too.
in our home for 50 years too, before we moved to assisted living, so.
I was reading a story today about the Earthwise photo, and taken today how different it would look, because there wouldn't be as much snow in the Arctic areas, right? And so we talk about glaciers, and but I've noticed, we've been in a drought for a long time. We don't get the snowfall we did. Steve did the American Birkebeiner a couple of times. Lately, it's getting canceled, it's getting shortened. Where do people even train for it? And then we talk about the money, what does that do to tourism too, right? But I saw photos of your farm where the snow was so high, right? You couldn't get to the cabin.
Yeah. Well, one scientist who was researching climate change predicts, I guess there's several, predicts that the weather that we will have in the next decade will be similar to what St. Louis is today.
Yeah.
And that's going to change along with all the bugs and whatever
Right.
else comes
Yeah.
with. a mild
And the
winter.
snowshoe hare, I read a report when I was at DNR about that and how, they're white and so they blend in. And if there's no snow, they don't, and then
It's gonna
they're
be
predators.
very hard on our tree species because our tree species have developed with a certain kind of weather. And if all of a sudden we have summer all the time, it's gonna be a problem. Somebody else have a question or a comment?
Go to Florida for snow, that's true. Texas, Florida.
Anybody? Well, if you want to purchase a book and have us sign them, we'll be here for a while. And
Yeah, we want to thank the library again,
And
Penny,
thank you
and
so very much
everybody.
for
Yeah, it was a pleasure celebrating our show.